Hi, I'm Micheal Huguet, and I'm an expert meteorologist at tomorrow.io. NOAA released our 2024 Atlantic hurricane forecast in May, and it's been making some headlines. We're going to take a few minutes here to discuss that forecast and why it's been a bigger news story than other forecasts have been historically. For starters, let's look at the forecast that NOAA released. We're expecting 17 to 25 named storms. That's tropical storms or hurricanes. 8 to 13 of those will be hurricanes, and 4 to 7 of those will be major hurricanes of category 3 or greater. This is the highest total number of storms ever forecast by NOAA in a preseason forecast. This forecast only speaks to the number of storms that are likely to develop. Not all of these storms are going to make landfall, and fewer still will make landfall in the US. So why is NOAA's forecast so high? Let's take a look at some of the factors. Most obviously is the sea surface temperatures. Temperatures have been warming due to climate change, and for the last 12 months or so, global temperatures and thus sea surface temperatures have been surging higher still. On the left, I'm showing sea surface temperature anomalies this year, and on the right, current sea surface temperature plots. Orange and red anomalies indicate areas that are warmer than normal. And you can see that includes most of the Atlantic basin. Temperatures above 80 Fahrenheit here on the sea surface temperature plot, that's oranges and warmer, indicate areas that are already conducive to tropical development. The water's already warm enough to produce a tropical storm. Temperatures above 84 Fahrenheit, that's the browns and the whites, indicate areas that could rapidly intensify a storm if one were to develop. Rapid intensification means the storm's winds increase by 30 knots or 35 miles per hour in 24 hours or less. That could quickly turn a category 1 storm into a major hurricane. There's a large area of the basin already hot enough to do that, and the season's just getting started. We're also transitioning from last year's historically strong El Nino to a La Nina in the El Nino Southern Oscillation. El Nino patterns are generally more stable over the Caribbean and Atlantic hurricane development regions, with lower thunderstorm development and increased wind shear. La Nina patterns are generally more unstable, which means more active thunderstorm development. They also have less wind shear, which is good for hurricane development. 2023 was an active season despite that strong El Nino, and we're expecting a transition to La Nina, and with all other factors being similar, climatologically, that means more storms. Another factor is the West African monsoon, which is expected to be more active this year. I'm showing a screenshot from the platform of Western Africa that's already got a few waves developing. This section of the intertropical convergence zone shifts north over the course of the summer, bringing these African easterly waves into areas that are conducive to tropical development. Long-lived, strong hurricanes often develop from these waves. And as these waves come off of Africa, they have a lot of time to develop over warm tropical waters. This portion of the central Atlantic also has lighter trade winds south of the subtropical high. This type of storm is often called a Cape Verde or Cabo Verde hurricane, as they tend to develop near the Cape Verde Islands off of Western Africa. These storms often stay out to sea as the subtropical high steers them back north before they reach Bermuda. But storms that don't stay out to sea are often quite strong. This is the track of Hurricane Andrew that was a Category 5 storm in 1992. You can see it start to curve northward before taking a turn west and making landfall over the Bahamas, Florida, and eventually Louisiana. Ivan, Dean, and Irma more recently were also Category 5 Cape Verde hurricanes, and there have been many others. There's also a few unique factors about this season that could make it more dangerous in addition to climatology. As mentioned before, global temperatures have been setting records for the last 12 months or so. This has kept sea surface temperatures quite warm even in the winter, and that warmth penetrates to lower depths. Slower moving storms typically upwell cooler waters that contribute to weakening. That upwelled water comes to the surface and is usually cool enough to weaken a storm. However, that deeper water could still be conducive to hurricane development because the heat penetrates to such depth. On the right here, we have tropical cyclone heat potential, which tries to measure the amount of latent heat energy at depth that storms could use for fuel. This was measured just a few days ago, and you can see a large swath of the Caribbean and the Central Atlantic is quite warm even at depth. Also, to reiterate for earlier, there's a large area of sea surface temperatures warm enough for rapid intensification. Rapid intensification is usually rare and very difficult to predict. And more opportunities for rapidly intensifying storms could create more intensity forecast errors. So as storms approach landfall, they could rapidly intensify, and that means forecasters aren't exactly sure how strong they'll be once they eventually make landfall. Finally, one of the most hazardous portions of any strong hurricane isn't the rain or the winds, it's the flooding, especially due to storm surge. Sea levels have been rising throughout the world due to climate change. Some areas in the Atlantic basin that are prone to hurricane landfalls have seen sea level rise as much as 20 centimeters, it's 7 to 8 inches. Higher water levels coupled with stronger storms will allow that storm surge to penetrate further inland and endanger areas that have had less risk from surge in the past. So in conclusion, 2024 is likely to be an above average year for Atlantic tropical development. While climate change is a large factor in this forecast, it's not the only factor taken into account. And while we're likely to see a high number of named storms, that doesn't necessarily mean that all of them will make landfall or even most of them will make landfall. Individuals and organizations need to be prepared regardless of their previous hurricane experience with a forecast this historically impactful across the Atlantic basin.